A millionaire visited a nursing home to make a donation and found his mother, who had been missing for 30 years. Santa Esperanza woke up under a clear sky, as if nothing could ever go wrong in a place like that. But that day, amid the scent of lavender and silent hallways, a forgotten truth was about to tear through the veil of routine. Lucas Andrade, heir to a real estate empire, parked his armored car in front of the Aurora Serena home. Impeccable suit, straight posture, charisma trained for the cameras. The film crew adjusted the lights and angles. An aide reviewed the speech script. Another social action with live coverage. Another image built by force. But what awaited him inside wasn't in any script. The hall was filled with wheelchairs, dim eyes, and tired smiles. And in the middle of that calm, almost lifeless scene, something broke the protocol. A woman stood up with difficulty, bone thin, her skin marked by time. A faded blue dress that seemed to hold too many memories. She approached, eyes trembling with contained emotion, and then, without warning, she recognized the stranger standing before her. He felt it. Words weren't needed. Those few seconds weighed more than all his contracts and fortunes combined. After the event, Lucas wandered aimlessly through the nursing home's corridors. Something kept pulling him back to that woman's face. The name she had spoken echoed like a lost key, a whisper that shook him to the bone. Later, he was taken to a small room in the back. Inside, an old cardboard box. Inside it, drawings, childish doodles, stories told in crayon, but one of them froze the air. A boy with big eyes and a little upturned nose. In his hand, a red toy airplane. The drawing was rough, but the face was his. Not similar, identical. In the corner of the page, written shakily, a name, Diego. That night, the city felt colder. The luxury of his penthouse no longer brought its usual comfort. There was an emptiness in his chest that no rehearsed explanation could fill. Adoption. He had always known, but he'd always believed it had been done the right way, with love, with truth. Now, something didn't add up. At dawn, Lucas reached out to a name he had buried in the past. Javier Montes, a former cop. Quiet, methodical, an expert at digging where no one wants him to dig. He gave Javier everything he had. Birth certificate, adoption records, names, and then he waited. 3 days later, the answer came, and with it, the ground disappeared beneath him. The original name was different, Diego Valente, missing since the age of 2. Mother, Rosa Valente. Psychiatric diagnosis, forced institutionalization. Case closed, no investigation. A convenient disappearance, a deleted record. Attached was an old photograph, a baby with dark eyes, a shy smile, light skin. Him. The face he saw in the mirror hadn't been born with the name Andrade. It hadn't come from love or from justice. It came from a transaction. Silent, cold, illegal. Across town, in a simple room that smelled of chamomile, a woman kept drawing, alone, waiting, knowing, deep down, that her son was still out there. And at that moment, without knowing why, she smiled, as if she could feel that the truth had finally risen from its grave. It was raining in Santa Esperanza. One of those thin, stubborn rains that wash nothing away. They only deepen the weight of what's already dirty. Lucas woke up early, but waking up no longer meant the same thing. Not after seeing that photo. Not after hearing the name Diego Valente and feeling his own name collapse from the inside. Time had changed. It now split into before and after the drawing. Javier Montes dove into the archives like a surgeon working on a hidden wound. Each document, a clue. Each gap, a lead. In just a few days, the puzzle began to take shape, and the picture was brutal. Rosa Valente, 27 years old, single mother, worked as a nursing assistant in a public hospital, diagnosed with postpartum psychosis just weeks after giving birth. Medical reports signed by a name all too familiar, Dr. Hector Navarro, renowned psychiatrist, owner of Grupo Navarro Psiquiatria, specialist in behavioral rehabilitation, and brother to Rosa's biological father, family. The same man who signed her institutionalization signed her sentence. No appeal, no justice. Lucas listened to each revelation as if watching his own story being unearthed by bare hands. Adoption? No. Sale. 200,000 reais. A bank transfer made months after Rosa's confinement. The payer, Eduardo Andrade, his father, or what he had believed to be one. Paperwork rushed through, smudged signatures, birth certificates with conflicting dates. No judge, no court, no legal process. Nothing. Lucas hadn't been taken in. He had been bought. The memories of childhood began to change color. The trips, the toys, the house in Villa Montserrat, all of it now seemed paid for with the same blood. There was a bitter urgency to confront, to hear from Eduardo's own mouth what could no longer be hidden, but he didn't expect the poison to still be that fresh. The meeting was cold, no excuses, no denial. Eduardo simply stared at him, cold eyes, and let out a sentence that burned itself into Lucas's memory. It was better this way. You would have rotted with that sick woman. That was enough. There was no father there, no love, only a man who took part in a transaction and convinced himself it was for a greater good. But in that case, the good had a name and a bank account. Meanwhile, Javier found something that changed everything. At the bottom of a locked box in the nursing home, buried among moldy books, a blue-covered notebook, Rosa's diary, notes written in secret, dates, names, fragments of memory, silent confessions of a woman whose child had been taken and whose sanity had been questioned. Inside were clues, dozens of women, institutionalized, separated from their babies, diagnosed with mental disorders they never had. A pattern, a scheme, a network. And between those pages, taped in with yellowed adhesive, a photograph. Two men, one young, clean-shaven, wearing a white coat, the other, older, holding a folder. In the background, a woman sitting on a stretcher, empty eyes. A belly, recently emptied. Handwritten caption, Marta, 2 days after giving birth, never saw her daughter again. Lucas felt the air grow heavier. It was no longer about him. It was about many, about all of them. The hole ran deep. And the name that appeared at its center, surrounded by mud and silence, was always the same, Hector Navarro. Rosa, once voiceless, was beginning to speak again. With the help of a young volunteer psychologist, she was starting to remember more names, more faces, more details. And in one of those bursts of lucid memory, she whispered, San Jacinto. That's where he hid me. San Jacinto, headquarters of Grupo Navarro Psiquiatria, the fortress where the files sleep. Where the names vanished, and where the truth might still be breathing, the next step was clear, but dangerous. Lucas, Rosa, and Javier had the pieces. Only one move remained, one that no one could ignore. The car moved down the road in silence. Rosa sat in the back seat, holding a small folder tightly against her chest. Lucas beside her, eyes fixed on the window, as if expecting to see the past racing along the roadside. Up front, Javier drove, quiet, focused. They were heading to San Jacinto, the city where everything began and where everything needed to end. Grupo Navarro Psiquiatria wasn't a hospital. It was a fortress, tinted glass, cameras on every corner, gardens trimmed with obsessive precision. From the reception to the top floor, everything screamed control, silence, power, but behind the clinical facade hid a filthy, discreet, and calculated operation, involuntary commitments, false medical reports, babies taken from mothers deemed unfit. The victims had no voice, and the files units were tightly locked away, but not anymore. Javier didn't ask for permission. He knew where to look. In the basement of the old wing, among dusty folders and steel drawers, were Hector Navarro's signatures, hundreds of them, each attached to the names of young, poor women who had just given birth, all diagnosed with variations of the same sentence: loss of contact with reality, potentially aggressive, risk to the child. None had any prior psychiatric record, but all of them lost their children. Lucas held each document as if holding a body. There it was, the truth, cold, stamped, archived with date, time, and case number. He felt sick. Rosa trembled, but her eyes were alive, as if time itself was finally returning the dignity that had been stolen from her. And then, at the end of the hallway, the inevitable moment. Hector Navarro, impeccable figure, gray hair perfectly combed, conservative tie, the face of a man who speaks in public, gives interviews, a man who's never challenged. But that day, His eyes met something unexpected, the face of the boy he had sold, and of the woman he had tried to silence. The tension in the air was almost physical. He recognized them but pretended not to, walked past them as if they were invisible, but inside, he faltered, and that was enough. Outside, Javier had already scanned the documents. The images were saved, encrypted, ready to be handed to anyone willing to listen. But the enemy would not retreat quietly. Hours later, a court officer knocked on Lucas's apartment door. An injunction. Rosa was forbidden from giving interviews. Any disclosure of the document's contents would be treated as defamation. Lucas, named as an accomplice in medical harassment, it was the system striking back, like a cornered animal, ready to bite. But Rosa had one more card, and it wasn't a bluff. Inside the folder she carried so carefully was a sealed envelope. Inside it, the only photo that survived her institutionalization, the one she had managed to hide inside her bra, wrists still tied. In the image, a hospital hallway, Hector, and a nurse, holding in her arms a baby wrapped in a green blanket. In the corner, almost invisible, the reflection of a mirror showed Rosa's face, watching, crying, witnessing her own child being taken away. The photo was raw, distorted, but real. And in the right hands, it could become ammunition, and it was in the right hands. Without Hector knowing, a copy of that envelope had been sent days earlier to a journalist from Rede Primera. Rosa didn't know if she'd have time, or if anyone would believe her, but she sent it anyway. And now all it would take was one click, one call, one headline, to make everything explode. That night, Lucas watched the news with the volume turned low. Rosa slept in the next room. Javier reviewed statements from other possible victims, and then his phone screen lit up. Rede Primera, exclusive. Documents link psychiatric clinic to illegal adoption network. Renowned doctor at the center of investigation. The name was there, Hector Navarro, on the screen, on everyone's lips, in the eye of the storm. From that moment on, there was no turning back. The streets were no longer indifferent. On posters, on screens, on the faces of strangers, the name that once meant only pain had become a cause. Rosa Valente, the forgotten woman, the mother erased from her own records. Now, the symbol of a truth the country had refused to see. And beside her, Lucas Andrade, or rather Diego Valente, the lost son, the stolen name, the restored identity. The Rede Primera report exploded like dynamite. Complaints came in waves. Witnesses, once silenced by fear, began to appear from every corner. Stories of mothers who had walked the same corridors, the same rooms, the same forged stamps. The names began to repeat. The dates matched. The pattern was unmistakable. And at the center, always the same man, Hector Navarro. His fall was swift. An arrest warrant, a press conference, plea deals offered in exchange for lighter sentences. Hector tried to bargain. He offered a list, the whereabouts of other still missing children, tried to play the cooperative man. But the time for manipulation was over. The public prosecutor's office refused. Public opinion demanded justice, not deals. And justice finally came. 15 years in prison, child trafficking, forgery, unlawful imprisonment, criminal association. With him fell 2 complicit judges, nurses, social workers, institutional directors, an entire network built to sell silence, brought down by the courage of a mother who never forgot. The victims resurfaced. Carmen Avila reunited with her 2 daughters in a shelter in Vitoria de Serra. Solange Prado embraced her teenage son in São Domingos. Beatriz Salazar left the institution where she'd been kept sedated for 12 years. Ana Paula and her daughter Sofia met for the first time and slowly learned how to be a family. Each case, a miracle sewn together with pain. Each reunion, a tear in the veil of impunity. Lucas never went back to the Andrade name. He returned to his adoptive father, the only thing he had left to give: silence. Eduardo was arrested weeks later after an old recording surfaced, a meeting between him and Hector, negotiating costs and guarantees. Everything was there, the confirmation, the coldness. Patricia cried, asked for forgiveness. She hadn't known the truth, never wanted to be part of the lie, and Rosa, generous as always, forgave her. Forgiveness didn't erase the pain, but it kept it from becoming an inheritance. With the money inherited from the Andrade Group, Lucas made a decision. The Aurora Serena home would be transformed. From a nursing home, it became a model center for mothers unjustly separated from their children, with psychological, legal, and social support. A new name, a new purpose, a clear mission. No more silence, no more theft hiding behind authority. Rosa left the home with steady steps. She underwent therapy with Dr. Camila Rojas and rebuilt her story. Little by little, she began to sleep without fear. She wrote again, and beside her son, she became a powerful voice in public hearings, debates, and social initiatives. Then, months later, came the recognition, approved unanimously by Congress, Law Number 14,982, the Rosa Diego Law, creation of the National Registry of Irregular Adoptions, review of psychiatric institutionalizations without judicial authorization, criminalization of falsified medical reports in healthcare institutions, full protection for mothers in vulnerable situations, a name that for decades had been buried in the corner of a forgotten file, was now written into law. In the Central Park of Santa Esperanza, Rosa and Lucas walk side by side. No words, just silence. But this time, a light silence, one of peace. Around them, mothers and children, reunions, hugs, hope. And on the wall of the new center, a hand-painted phrase reads, "The truth doesn't disappear. It only waits for the right moment to be heard." And now it was heard. Not every mother finds her child, not every child discovers the truth. But when it happens, silence loses. If this story moved you, leave a word in the comments below. Justice. That's enough for us to know you felt it. And if you want more stories like this to reach those who need to hear them, leave a like, subscribe. Help this truth keep spreading.